Yeah. And probably had a roommate who had that at the time.
Kyle, thank you. You can say stuff. I won't say stuff. I fell today and I'm right.
Yeah. We're all a little jangled today.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kyle Herrington. I've known Aaron for quite a while now. We've sort of like meandered in and out of each other's lives over the past 10, 15, maybe not 15, 12 years or so. We've really been colleagues to bounce things off of each other, and you know, sometimes when one of us is not making work as much as the other one, we push each other a little bit. So I was really excited to work with her in presenting the show, because I think that our work plays together in a really fun way, and a lot of times there's sort of like subconscious themes that sometimes we're both touching upon, which is really fun. But a little bit about my background. I am a graduate of Ball State. I graduated in 2006 with a degree in painting. And then I moved to Indianapolis in 2006 at the same time, and kind of just dove into the city trying to find how to get involved. Had a lot of closed doors, didn't know anybody, and I was like super involved at Ball State, so I was like, why is no one wanting to play with me? And what's going on? So I became like extremely obnoxious, like going to like every gallery I could, being like, what's your submission policy? Who runs this? What's going on? And through that, got a couple opportunities to show my work. I ended up getting one of the Beckman Emerging Artist Fellowships from the Arts Council. I was one of the inaugural recipients of that, so that was a really cool thing. And I met a lot of really great people through that, and really that's kind of how I got my foot in the door in the city. So I started showing my work. At the same time, I started a job at the Indianapolis Art Center, cleaning their studios and scraping paint off tables and basically being like the bitch of the entire place. And, it was really good for my work though, because you know, I was around all these people and really excited to make work, and then it was making me excited to push my own work. And then as I started to go along the career, I found myself sort of like climbing the ladder a little bit. I moved up to an exhibitions role where I was helping hang all of the shows, and then a couple years after that I was curating the shows, and then I was the director of the department. And the whole time that was going on, my own personal art was kind of like slowing down, and I have less time for that. I'm less excited about that. And I would say about a couple years ago, I really was getting frustrated because I was wanting to make work, but I was feeling incredibly unmotivated and uninspired and not sure what I was doing. When I first got out of school, I was making really like safe paintings that were really boring to me, and I don't know why I was making them. I think I was in this mentality of like putting together portfolios to take to galleries, and are these what people want to see and what people want to show, and especially coming to some place like Indianapolis where at least 10 years ago, maybe not so much today, but at least 10 years ago, there was this mentality of like, well, it has to be appropriate to show. It has to be sort of, not commercial necessarily, but I think that Indianapolis has grown a lot in the last 10 years in terms of what people are willing to bite onto and give people a chance. So at that time, I was making work that I thought was really safe, but I was like sick of it. It didn't feel earnest to me. It didn't feel like it was actually what I was interested in. And when I got that job at the Art Center and realized, okay, well, I have a paycheck here and it's working the arts and talking to people, I realized that I could make the work that I actually wanted to make and not be beholden to that for a paycheck or to pay rent or anything like that. So I started really just doing a lot of stuff in private, a lot of things that I thought were really funny that I weren't showing people, things that were a little like off color. And I was really hesitant to show them for a long time. And then that's probably around the time that I met you. And we were really like just comparing things, and I got a lot of really good feedback from people about, these are really great, these seem more like your personality, these seem more earnest and honest to what you're actually doing. So I kind of jumped into that world. So the first series of paintings that I was making was this whole series of like space vignettes with all these like pop culture words floating in them, and words that I had, like, so I keep a really big, thick, black sketchbook pretty much everywhere I go. I don't have it right now, but I would write down things that I heard. So it was less of a sketchbook, but not quite a diary. It was more of like a sketchbook of words, of phrases that I would hear in public, or at bars, or on reality television, or Maury Povich, things like that. And I would keep these interesting phrases and then basically like appropriate them onto these like big space landscapes, and it was really interesting for me to see because people took them a lot of different ways. Like I had this one painting that was a little space painting with this gilded frame around it, and it just said, "You bitch." And it was like still one of my favorite paintings because some people read there was no punctuation, so people were reading the inflection as either like someone fighting or someone like joking with their friend or like an endearing comment. And I was really interested in the interpretation that the viewer had and how different people from different backgrounds and different social circles could read into that. At the same time that was happening, I found myself in quite a few overlapping social circles because being in sort of the arts administration field, I get to see a lot of like how the bacon's made or whatever that's saying. But I got to see a lot of the background stuff, and I got to be a part of a lot of like high-level panels and art curators talking and arts administrators talking and really talking about artists and what they're looking at from artists. But then having a studio in town and being friends with a lot of artists, I would hear what their frustrations were with arts administrators and curators, and I would kind of have these weird overlapping opinions all in my head that I was trying to reconcile and figure out what to do with. Then that was really when I was like getting into the gay culture as well, and a lot of my gay friends and people that I was dating and stuff like that were not artists, not interested in art, and so it was interesting to hear an outsider's perspective also in the art world. So I had these sort of like three weird Venn diagram circles fishing around, and I felt like I was sort of pandering to different points of these like social circles that I had, and that's kind of where those pop culture paintings came up. Then, as I grew again more in my career at the Art Center and curating more, I kind of got sick of painting and I didn't like what I was doing anymore, and so I took a really big break, and then I just got the itch. Like I think as you were saying, like if making art or making an image really scratches that itch that you have, and to empower other artists is something that I really love doing. That's why I love curating, but at the end of the day, like if I'm not making something too, it really wears on me. So I knew I wanted to make some more work, and then it kind of like history sort of repeated itself as I started making things kind of in secret. And I made this piece that was a jockstrap that had all these meat ads, all like decoupage on it, because collage is a really big part of my working experience too. I just love taking images and putting them in there and seeing what people can read into those images. So kind of going back to those text paintings that I was doing, it's interesting just to take something that's commercial, that's kind of standard and sort of like stock, and to see what people's entry points are into that image. So I took all these meat things, put them on a jockstrap, but I didn't know how to sew. I have a painting degree, I'm not a sculptor, I don't know a lot of the techniques behind that, so I stapled this thing together and took a picture of it, and the picture looked great and lovely and wonderful, and then it like fell apart an hour later after that, and I was like, okay. Now I have to teach myself how to sew. Okay, this is going to be fun. So, luckily my sister had a sewing machine that she wasn't using, and she gave it to me. And that's kind of like where all of these jock straps came from, is after many, many attempts, I probably made 30 of them, and it was all completely self-taught. I never took sewing classes. I did look up a couple of YouTube videos when I got stuck with things, but the early ones are really pretty rough around the edges. But I was really looking at the jock straps as sketches or as studies of ideas, and kind of taking that idea of that sketchbook that I had with all these little notations in them, and taking that mentality and putting them into these jock straps, basically. My boyfriend right now is actually in school for to have a PhD of human sexuality, so he's very involved in conferences and all of these different aspects of the LGBT community and the kink community and the fetish community, and those are all things that are very extremely interesting to me, and I would take an idea and kind of translate it into one of these jock straps, and I found that the jock straps really were a very good way of me working out these ideas that I had to feed into larger things. So I have these three paintings that are in the show, which I was not planning on doing when I was doing the jock straps, but as I was doing these jock straps, I was falling upon imagery and ideas that eventually felt like they needed a different vehicle than just the jock strap. So for example, this jock strap over here, which is the glory hole jock strap, basically was the inspiration for this middle painting right here, because I really liked the physical process of making that, and I think as Erin said, there's a meditative quality to sort of like having an object and having your hands on an object, but I just felt like it was asking for something a little bit more deep in terms of exploring both technically and with materials and with ideas. So that's where a lot of these jock straps and things fed into was the paintings. really right now I'm excited to continue on, I think, with a lot more paintings, and I'm really interested in touching upon a lot of these like queer culture stereotypes or underrepresented situations, I guess. But I like to sort of toe the line between sort of like being mysterious, but also kind of saying what it is at the same time. I think there's a little bit of like coding, especially like in queer history, there's like a long history of things called like coding and flagging and all these things, and having little signs to other people that are also like interested in your fetish or interested in what you're doing. And the general public doesn't know what a lot of these symbols and signs are, but we use things to indicate that to other people. There's the whole thing with like the handkerchiefs, the hanky code that you put in your back pocket, where if it's like a certain color, it means like you're into certain miscreant activities or whatever, and like different sides. So like this is sort of my way, I think, of exploring those issues and exploring those different things. It was funny at the opening because I did have a lot of like my art community friends come in here that wouldn't necessarily read into this, but then I had like my gay friends that would come in and they were not artists, and I was like, oh, this is about like a glory hole, right? Like, cool. So these have just been a really interesting and also really satisfying like mix of my interest in obviously creating art and also living as a gay person in the Midwest. I think that plays a really big role in my work right now too, especially with the jockstraps too. I think there's a little bit of like a DIY mentality that I'm really interested in. Being an artist and being queer in the Midwest is like sort of a double whammy sometimes, because almost every artist that is like, okay, well, I'm gonna move to New York or Chicago or LA or whatever, and then the same thing with being in the LGBT landscape. So, I think a lot of times there's a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I can only speak for myself. There's a chip on my shoulder of sometimes feeling like a little bit less than the big city gays or whatever, So it's really about kind of celebrating that DIY mentality of being gay in the Midwest and exploring the different ways that we handle that and communicate and bond and fight back and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really interested to see where this goes, and it's all very interesting to me. And I like this painting on the end that's based off of Poppers is next to Aaron's Lulu Popper Nothing painting. So I'm not sure if I'll continue on with the jockstrap. I probably will continue on with the jockstraps and the harnesses and stuff like that. I think they're really fun and they're really good for informing these other things. But it's been, it's really felt like this has been a starting point for a lot of things that I can go onto. So I'm excited.
Look, this isn't one-sided. If you have questions or, oh wait, I guess I gave some simple questions like, why does it cost that? Or, I thought you said. Yeah, if you have any questions, I like them.
Why does it cost that?
Why does it cost that?
Why does it cost that?
Really?
How do you price things?
I price things based on materials, hours invested based on a living wage, and expensive living. So, I have to take into account the fact that we are in Indianapolis. My rent is not super expensive, but normal rent is X. So no one ever taught me that. Like no one ever gave me a rubric. Like it's all, and then a little dash of pixie dust. Like
I remember when I was in school that it was like the idea that was like, well, you're buying an artist's like knowledge and skills and experiences too. I didn't know if that was important for you as well.
I just price things on how much I feel that I want to price them. I don't know, I think I price on size, but at the same time I've been told that I underprice myself a lot, but I don't really care because like I said earlier, like I'm not trying to make a living off of my work. I have that luxury, thank goodness. If that was a different story, it might be different. But I'm also you know, a homeowner with a basement full of 20 years of artwork that I've made that nobody wants, and then just sitting there and like getting cat pee and mold all over it. So like, my philosophy is, if somebody really loves it, like if I have it priced at $300 and someone's like, oh, I love this thing like, so much, if they won't give me $80 for it, I'll probably give them $80 for it. But like, that's after like the debut of it and everything like that. But yeah, pricing is so, there's no like rhyme or reason for it. And like as a curator, I get that question all the time too. Like, you'll tell me how much the price is, and I'm like, but I've had people like figure out like, my work is this much dollars per square inch. Like, you know, it's like people go by, or some people are super sentimental and they're like, this is $10,000 because it's about my grandmother and I don't want to get rid of it. And I've done that too a couple times. If there's a piece that I really love, I'll price it like, okay, if I got this much money for it, I'd be thrilled to let it go, but I do love it. So no one's ever surprised me with that kind of sales for it.
I was just also making conceptual work for so long, or like things that weren't things, that I was like, I'm not gonna sell work ever. Like, I don't think about it. So, like, kind of doing it again is like, this could turn into a steady
I feel like it's just arbitrary a lot of the time. It's like there's no really rhyme or reason.
I think it's also hard because we're in a place where there's not an established art market, or seemingly so.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is an important consideration. What's the market like? Because you don't want to underprice your work, because that kind of sets a weird expectation for other artists.
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, what is the value that you put on something? Like,
I have a question.
wait on.
Did you consciously like do like women's work, such as like the cross stitching and like the like fashionable items, like to sort of show like how things don't, that seemingly like maybe aren't art can be actual art, or like things that were maybe in history seen as like things that women would just do can have like actual value placed to them?
Gender definitely informs the things that I look at, and maybe the things that I, you know, take inspiration from. I don't know if it was super like loud in my kind of, you know, selection, but yeah, it's weird. Like, it's been weird being a person who makes, you know, fiber artwork, like being a woman who makes fiber art, going to art school and having people be like, this is about gender, right? And it's like, no, dude, like,
Moving beyond that, like using sort of like tools, but then like saying something more than just being like, this is about gender.
yeah. I mean, I think my own kind of education, like my self-education has been like, I want to look at stuff made by people that I feel like I share something with, and, you know, if that's like, and so that definitely means like looking at work made by women and probably considering it more carefully and being like, you know, I want to look at this, so I bet other people want to look at it too. Like, that's kind of, it's all in the pot.
Did you guys name the show Subprime as like a little thing about the Midwest?
That's your.
I named the show. I had a piece with an Amazon box in it that didn't make it in the show. That was called Subprime, but I felt like there was some dominance and submission themes in the work, and also this kind of a chip on the shoulderedness.
Do you feel similarly about working in the Midwest as columnist?
I think that it's really difficult for me to consider work any other way, because I've only ever lived in the Midwest. You know, I think that people sort of like fetishize Midwestern corn people. I don't know, like, I was in this stupid show in Toledo that was like organized by a friend in LA, but it was like, it was called Midwest Mindset. It was like just about like, you know, look how broken. Look how they're so broken. It's like, fuck you.
Well, yeah, I've heard a lot of that. I mean, especially like even people that I knew when I started kind of doing the art thing in Indianapolis that have moved on to other cities of like, oh, your artwork is so Midwestern. And then like there's people that live in LA now, it's like, girl, okay, you've been gone for like 5 years, you need to slow your roll, it's not that. But like there is a little bit of a stigma I can feel like at times, and then there is a bit of like, okay, well now I have to like be the big brother for like all of us because like fuck you, like this isn't like less than. But then at the same time, there's times where I lean into it and definitely pander towards it a little bit too. You know, it's a complicated relationship, as probably anyone that lives here can tell you.
Right. Or I think, you know, I don't think like my identity is very interesting, and that kind of has to do with like my geographic identity. But also, when I find myself like applying for stuff, I'm like, do you need a Midwesterner? Because I am one. I've been doing the same shit as you. Like
yeah, I've definitely
like if you'd like to include a diverse picture of like people making like.
I've leaned into it heavily in like applications to things before, like but
Have outside of here or here?
like outside of Indiana,
Applications for places
like for shows and for residencies and
outside of Indiana?
Yeah, I've definitely leaned into the Midwestern thing heavily at times. I don't know, it's complicated. Sometimes you're like, do I wear this as a badge, or do I put it under my cloak and like let nobody see it? And then it's like a weird deformed toe that I don't know the answer. So, because you don't want to, like, for me at least, I don't want that to be like my gimmick. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm like the quaint, queer Midwestern artist, look what I'm doing. But, I mean, it is a unique perspective from other things as well, too. So it's, I think it has to be earnest and genuine. I think people can read through it if it's not, but like the people that are living in LA now, they're like, oh, I'm just like a Midwestern gal and I'm doing this, and you're just like, this has nothing to do with that at all. I don't know, it's tough.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I grew up in Indianapolis and I moved away for a long time. I'm back here recently, and it's kind of blown my mind at how much available space there is, and that's like something that's always been interesting me in like art and music. It's like all the space between the notes, or the space between the images and stuff, like the negative space. Do you think that that's like just your daily experience of living in Indianapolis and having all that negative space is good or bad for your art?
Do you instinct there?
I mean, I think for me it's good. It's a visual pause in between things, and it's certainly, you know, somewhere like Manhattan or Chicago or somewhere where you're just bombarded by all of these things constantly, and images and textures overlapping, and lights and color and all this other stuff. Like when you're driving down 38th Street and there's like 3 vacant buildings that are all taupe, and then you see something, it's gonna make you like study that thing that's more interesting a little bit closer than if it was like 30 things. And I think like that's an interesting point, because like negative space for me is important in a lot of my images. Just that visual rest in between something, because I think what it does is it gives people time to process what they're actually looking at. I mean, I would say that you have a lot of negative space in your work too, so I don't know if it's a direct reflection of living in a city the size that we are, but I think it, at least subconsciously, probably influences us on some level.
I have wondered many times what my work would look like if I, you know, lived elsewhere, or, you know, lived in just a situation that was more dense or something, you know, whether that's geographically or culturally. I think I've kind of talked a lot about like how boredom has been like a really important, boredom has been central to my practice. Like, you know, everything I've done is because I want to see something happen, or, you know, in spaces, whether it's the blank page or like, you know, physical space. So I do like have existential moments where I'm like, would I, you know, if there was certain infrastructure even in place, like what would I make? Like, you know, if I didn't feel like I needed to create infrastructure on some level or something, and it was just like I could prioritize my own expression or something, like, you know, that's like a weird abstraction, but like, I don't know.
Erin, I have a question.
Yes.
You're like more performance-based work, and you're more 2D imagery. Do do you find these things intersect either in terms of like the content or the process, or do these things exist in like different realms for you?
I guess that was what I was kind of trying to get at in my slideshow and showing that like those things do overlap. So, you know, whether it's, you know, going on doing a crazy staged nautical, you know, fashion shoot where we are, you know, styling our friends in these scarves that I make, like those are, you know, those were drawings first, like, and so yeah, they're not particularly separate. I think with this specific work, just like I said, it was kind of a little bit of a step away from performance stuff, where, like I said, it was just kind of like, what's something that you don't get at through language, and you know, just the undeniable power to just be like, I'm gonna put some images and I don't know what it's about, like, you know, versus I feel like there's a lot of I forget what the word is, but just kind of filling in, just explaining what's happening in like performance work or something. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. If you don't have any other if you have other questions and you just want to ask us sometime when we're not standing in this room. Cool. Thank you all for coming. Thank you guys. Exposition, that was the word I was trying to think of. Yeah, good. Good work. Hi, Becca. What's up? Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so
Sometimes when the coworkers go to
Yeah.